But they're asking you the question, here's the point, gentlemen, is Obama most like Jimmy Carter? And they give a lot of things to talk about called the Carter syndrome. Barack Obama might yet revolutionize America's foreign policy, and they talk about how he may be the new Jimmy Carter. So, and that deals to the core of Israel, and that's where I want to go. Gentlemen?
I'll get you to Israel.
Okay.
But I just say that's when I stopped wearing my Naval Academy ring when Carter was president. Haven't worn it since, except for ceremonial occasions. I think the comparison is very naive. I agree with you about your assessment of Jimmy Carter, but I think he is injured by the comparison, because what I don't understand is, why are we surprised? Now, wait a minute. Can you tell me any grade that our current president has gotten in any of his schools? No, he spends millions of dollars keeping his school records from your awareness, not just the birth certificate. The people that have corrupted our country are the media, who have gone to such extremes to hide the truth. The U.S. population got an IQ test and failed. It was called the 2008 elections. Not a question of for or against him. We knew nothing about him. He was sold to us by the media. Even people who were his boosters have to admit they know zero about him. What do we know about him? He's a Muslim. We have the primary enemy of America is Islam. Let's call it by a spade. It's committed to our destruction. We have put a Muslim in the White House. He has never and by the way, I'm not making this up. It's in his own autobiography. And he has never rejected the tenets of Islam, and he's now in charge of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I mean, come on, let's get serious. This is crazy. So why are we surprised? Okay, he has come from a hate America background. Everything you do know about, very little, but what we do know about him has been anti everything we stand for, and he's in the White House. So why are we surprised? Why are we surprised? So now you turn and realize that for the first time, now see, people, when I travel, there's two questions when we have an open Q&A. Typically, there's two questions we can always ask. Where's American prophecy? Anybody who studied eschatology recognize that all the major players are clearly identified. America is conspicuous in its absence of mention. So that's a valid area of discussion. Then the second question we often get to the spiritually mature audience to say, why hasn't God judged America? Billy Graham quipped several decades ago very cleverly. He says, if God doesn't judge America, he'll have to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah. You know, Thomas Jefferson said the same thing back in 1781. He says, I tremble for my country when I recall that God is just and that his justice will not sleep forever. So the point is, why are we surprised? Now, if you're going to start talking about the judgment of God, you quickly discover there's at least 4 or 5 kinds of judgment. There's calamitous judgment like Noah and all of that. There's eschatological judgment like Revelation 6 and following and so on. One of his judgments could be called his abandonment judgment. Imagine yourself as Samson on that third visit to Delilah, and when you wake up, you discover that your strength is gone. In a few seconds, you realize that God has abandoned you. Can you imagine how Samson felt as he realized the significance of not being able to break loose like he had before, and so forth? The abandonment judgment. That's exactly what Hosea was called to present to the northern kingdom. And God says to him, leave Ephraim alone. He's joined himself to idols. That summarizes the whole indictment of God against the northern kingdom, his abandonment judgment. Now, I have preached for years, 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, forgive their sin, and heal the land. God says, if you do 4 things, I'll do 3, and I preach that. I have to be honest with you, I'm not sure I can anymore. Why? Because when I was redoing our Genesis commentary, I was startled to discover how God's primary jealousy is as his role as creator, not as redeemer. To understand his redemption, you have to have the Word of God. So you have an excuse, so to speak, not knowing that. But you do not have an excuse about the creation, because the creation testifies of itself, of him. Psalm 19, etc. So the point is, I was startled to discover that God's primary passion or jealousy, if you want to call it that, is as his role as creator. And I also was startled to discover there is a specific judgment of God that is poured out upon a nation that fails to acknowledge him as creator. I used to read Romans chapter 1, verse 18 to the end, and I thought it was about homosexuality. No, it isn't. Not if you read it carefully. In that passage, starting at Romans 1, from verse 18 to the end, 3 times in that passage, God says, because they did not recognize me as creator, I, God, will give them over to that which is not convenient. And then it describes homosexuality in terms that you can't read it to a small family, to young people. I mean, it's pretty graphic. The point is, it's not about homosexuality. I always thought it was. No, read it carefully. It's about a judgment of God that God puts upon a culture that fails to acknowledge him as creator. And I'm not talking homosexual. I always looked at it as an individual choice, as my friend Don Perkins pointed out. That's an issue for the individual. Fine. As a collective thing, it's a judgment of God. And so, as I read any paper, pick it up, I'm beginning to suspect. I'll say it carefully. I'm beginning to suspect that the judgment of God has begun, not because of the earthquakes and that. No. It's because of the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah was not homosexuality. It was the public condoning of it. Okay? And to see where we're headed, I think you start talking about Jimmy Carter. Yeah. I think it's one of those rare comparisons that I think it's unfair to Jimmy Carter to compare him to Obama, because Obama is a sworn enemy. Obama is a sworn enemy of everything I stand for. And so he's not my president.